attending the licensing and appeals meeting held today at the Town Hall, Bank Road, Matlock. I'm Dawn Gretrix. I'm the Vice Chair of the Licensing and Appeals Committee. To my right is Grace Dowson, our Licensing Manager. Then we have Steve Capes, and then next to Steve we have Karen. And to my left, we have Kerry. And then to my further left, we have Tommy, who will be looking after us tonight where needed. Thank you. So, first of all, we will move on to apologies. Agenda item 1. Do we have any apologies, please, Tommy?
Thank you, Chair. We only have apologies from Councillor Linthwaite.
Rightio. Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. These are the minutes of the 26th of March. Everybody has had the opportunity to read these. Would someone like to move this? Councillor Slack. Thank you, Councillor Slack. Do we have a seconder?
I've got a point of correction, if that's okay, or a query on the minutes. Do I raise that now or wait for the vote?
Yes, if you could raise that now, please, Councillor.
I think so. My light's on. Where it says resolved on page 7, and I think later on as well, the previous proposals just seem to have been pasted. So it says that we resolved to consider in several paragraphs, when actually we considered and then we resolved, you know what I mean? So I think something's gone wrong with the wording of the minutes there. I think it's pasted in resolutions rather than...
Right, so this is
recommendations
rather
than resolutions, sorry.
Yeah, I think Tom is just having a look now, Councillor Maelstrom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We can amend that. We can correct that.
So we can amend that accordingly. Thank you. So do we have a seconder, please? Now we've got this amendment. Yes, Councillor Maelstrom. So we'll take it to the vote. Thank you. Any abstentions?
I know you can vote when you weren't there, but I don't feel happy, so I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hobson. Okay, Councillor Flitter. No, Councillor Buttle even. Thank you, Councillor. I'm raising your into the hierarchy up here. Okay, and do we have any against? We've got abstentions. Any against? No. Okay, so that is carried. Thank you. The next item is item 3, which is interests. Has anybody any interests that they would like to declare? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 4, public participation. And I see we don't have anybody. So item 5 is going to be the permanent pavement licensing regime. So I'm now going to hand you over to Grace, who's going to present the report. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Chair. The Business and Planning Act 2020 was introduced in response to COVID as temporary legislation. With effect from Sunday the 31st of March 2024, the government has made the previous temporary scheme permanent with several amendments through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. A pavement licence is granted by the local authority or deemed to have been granted, which allows the licence holder to place removable furniture over certain highways adjacent to the premises in relation to which the application was made for certain purposes. We have currently 14 existing licences under the temporary legislation, all of which one will expire on the 30th of September 2024. A licence permits the business to use furniture placed on the highway to sell or serve food or drink, or allow it to be used by people for consumption of food or drink supplied from or in connection with the use of the business. Businesses that do not use their premises for the sale of food, such as, for example, hair or beauty salons, are still required to apply for permission to place furniture on the pavement under the Highways Act 1980, which would be to Derbyshire County Council. The furniture permitted under the licence may include counters, stalls, tables, chairs, benches, umbrellas, barriers, heaters and other articles used in connection with consumption of food and drink. Furniture that is not removable and used in connection with the outdoor selling or consumption of food is not permitted under the pavement licence. It must be able to be removed. Advertising A boards are not included in the furniture within the pavement licensing regime, and they still require consent under the Highways Act 1980, which would be Derbyshire County Council. When determining the pavement licence applications, the Council must have regard to the guidance issued by the Secretary of State. The licence is to last for 2 years, where previously it was only a year, unless we as the Council deem that it should be for a shorter period. The temporary licence fee was capped at £100, and Derbyshire Dales introduced this fee from the 1st of April 2023. Under the permanent pavement licensing regime laid out in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, the fee is now capped at £500 for a first-time grant application and £350 for a renewal application. The increase and fee cap are intended to balance both the local authority and business interests. The increase in fee cap is intended to allow authorities to recover the costs of processing, monitoring and enforcing licences. Several options for fees have been considered, and these are listed on page 14 of the report. And I believe, Councillor Gretrix, this is something which was previously asked for.
That's right. So some of you who were members of the committee last year, so Councillor Butcher, you wasn't on the committee at that time. So in June of last year, we discussed the temporary pavement licensing regime, and we made a resolution with 2 points. So the second point, I just wanted everyone to recap this and just to recall it, because it has perhaps bearance on tonight. So we agreed at that meeting that the viability of a band structure of fees for temporary pavement licensing be investigated for possible implementation to alleviate the cost pressures on small businesses within the district. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The costings for the licences have been determined on a full cost recovery basis at £500 for a first application and £350 for a renewal application. The recommendation is that the fees are discussed at this evening's meeting to determine a fee for a grant application and a renewal application for a permanent pavement area licence. For additional members' knowledge, I have just recently looked at the Derbyshire County Council website, and although they no longer do street cafes because it falls under ourselves, their information is still available as to what and how they managed it. Street cafes were previously issued by Derbyshire County Council, and their fee for 2 years would have been at least £450 for a small cafe with 6 chairs. With 12 chairs, that would have increased to £900. And for 16 chairs, the cost would have been £1,200. Back to you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, Grace, for that. Does anybody here have any questions regarding the report? Councillor Slack.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Regarding things outside front of shops and so forth, it's just a question. Same as a lot of greengrocery florist shops, and that I was guilty of it when I was running shops. We put benches outside the front on the pavement and display plants or flowers and so forth. They will come under this legislation, will they?
And unfortunately, no, because we only deal with businesses that serve food and drink.
Yeah, so there's a loophole there, isn't there? Yeah.
Or potentially it would be covered by the County Council under the existing Highways Act.
Yeah. But, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Burford.
If you could just a bit of clarification, please, on a couple of points. Because Could you just define what the pavement is? Is all the pavement in front of a shop or a cafe owned by county council? So I thought that halfway towards the road was owned by the premises. I'm not really sure.
It's a difficult one, and it is quite complex when you start looking at it.
Right.
If it is on the public highway, so that is the public highway owned by the council, then we can require a pavement licence.
Yeah.
If they have tables and chairs within the curtilage of their own business,
Yeah.
or a part of the pavement outside the premise is owned by the landlord and not the public highway, then that wouldn't fall under us. So we couldn't insist on a pavement licence for that. So if it was private land, we can't manage that. In respect to something that you've just mentioned there, I am aware that Matlock Bath, the South Parade, and I've got to get this right, the South Parade have outside their premises metal clips or studs in the floor, and that part of the pavement belongs to the business. So that's in Matlock Bath, so that's only one area, and it is only part of Matlock Bath. My understanding is that that doesn't go up as far as North Parade, so it is possible that some of the businesses in Matlock Bath will require a pavement licence under this legislation. But this is something that each one that we look at has got to be determined in its own merit.
So if I could just come back, do we keep a record then of all that?
We have certain records because we've had the input in the last 4 years for the temporary COVID legislation. Any application that comes to us, the highways act as a consultee. So over a period of time, if a cafe has put a licence application in, we've sent that to highways for their comments. They may well have come back and said it's not public highway, it's privately owned, or in the case of Matlock Bath, they've sent us details of where the metal points go up to and where they don't. So it is a matter of us researching it on each application, but the consultee is highways, and they are the ones that know whether it's public highway or not.
And the second question, if I may, is just about A-boards. I did have a complaint last week, actually, about A-boards causing obstruction. So would that need to go to the county?
Yes,
I can do
it
that,
would.
yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
it's unfortunate that it isn't covered under us, because I do know that some of the pavements use A-boards within their area, or some of them have even used it to act as part of their barriers, but they still remain under county council.
Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Clarification about this able to be removed.
Yes,
That doesn't mean they have to be removed every day.
yes,
They do have to be.
they are required to be removed every day.
Right.
That is a requirement of the Act. It was a requirement of as far as I'm aware, the street cafe licences that the highways have previously done. It was a requirement of the COVID requirements under the temporary legislation, and it is for ourselves under this. The only thing I would highlight is, and it's mentioned briefly in the report, is there is an area in Ashbourne which belongs to ourselves, and those areas wouldn't fall under the pavement regime, hence why they're termed sitting out licences. But the idea is that they will have to similarly comply with the removable request, and that is something that the police are very keen on, because unfortunately under crime and disorder they can potentially become weapons.
Thank you, Chair. And just to follow up, to what extent is that widely known amongst landlords?
From a point of view of the 14 premises that have got pavement licences, they will know. Likewise, I would have thought anyone who'd applied to county council in the past and possibly been refused would also know.
Thank you. Just point of information, because one landlord in Ashbourne has just taken delivery of some new, not so very portable.
Oh, right, okay.
Thank you. Councillor Butcher.
Yes. The question is gone from my brain now. It's very interesting the amount of knowledge you need to have for this. So I'm
Thank
quite
you.
impressed by all that. What was my question? Oh yes, that's right. So it's been said by some of the members or at least one member in Labour Group, that the increase from £100 to £500 seems a lot, and seems a lot particularly for a small business. But I don't personally have a sense of that, so I don't know whether that is a lot or not. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, it has been slightly misconstrued. The £100 was for a year's licence, so anybody under the temporary licence requirement had to apply for a licence, and that licence ran till the 30th of September each year. There was no renewal process under the temporary process, so the person had to reapply again then for another year's licence at another £100. I appreciate that this council for the first couple of years chose not to charge that £100. The licence that we're now looking at under the permanent licensing regime is for 2 years. So whereas we're looking at a 350 potentially for a renewal and 500 for a grant, you would be talking 175 a year for a renewal and 250 for a grant. Obviously that is for discussion today, but it is over a 2-year period. The fact that the fee is set allows the business to budget accordingly and be aware of what is required for a 2-year period without potentially a fee going up on a yearly basis, which it could have previously done. So there is potentially an increase, but it is for a longer licence.
Just to clarify, even though it's an increase, is it a lot? I don't know. I mean, small businesses don't necessarily only make that much. I don't really understand.
It's based on the costs of the council. So we have worked it out as that is the cost to the council for recovery. If it was 2 years, the £250 per year for a grant would equate to £4.81 a week. And for a renewal, the £175 for a year would equate to £3.37 per week.
Yeah, that's a helpful point.
Chair, I don't know if it's helpful to come in on that. I think that's been helpful clarification from Grace, and clearly it is an increase on the £200 for 2 years, which is what's been had up till late. However, that's only been a temporary COVID and post-COVID situation. Prior to that, the Derbyshire County Council fee would have been £450 for 2 years. So from £450 for 2 years to, in this case, £500 for the first 2 years and then £350 afterwards is not an increase, and in some respects perhaps a decrease.
Okay, so next we have on the list Councillor Buttle.
Thank you very much, John. Will we be reviewing the fees and charges, our costs, and the enthusiasm of the buyers? You know, like, are we going to be saying after 2 years, are we going to consult with them and ask them how they feel about the way we're managing it and how this is going?
The licence is only set for 2 years. That is the maximum it can be. It can be for a shorter period, but it can't be more than 2. So ultimately, yes, that would give us the opportunity to work with any feedback or any information attained from the customers and the members of public generally in that period.
Will the price be reviewed by Governance and Resources or this committee?
Could be both. Could be both. I mean, ultimately, we've been under the legislation that's come out in respect of the 31st of March. They've set the cap at 350 and 500. That for some councils and some authorities may not cover their costs. Who am I to say? But the government may well readdress that if that feedback is received from other councils.
my
It's an
fa-
unknown entity for the 2 years, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and my last question is, will we be keeping count and finding out how much work we put in, how much it's costing us?
Yes, yeah, because the procedure and the process is exactly the same for whether you've got 16 tables or whether you've got 22.
I claim that was the last question, I'm lying. Strategically, do we kind of try to run like net zero cost for things like licenses that we provide and what have you? So like we provide an overview of what's happening and then we say, yeah, if we've done this efficiently, we're going to lower the prices, or is that what we would do? Is that a principle?
Ultimately, under the licensing regime, and I'm talking most licenses here, you cannot be seen to be making a profit, and you cannot be seen to be making a deficit. So, in time, it's meant to be cost level, effective. Obviously, that 2 years would give us that ability to see over a period of time what is required, enforcement-wise, monitoring-wise, and so on.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I think in anybody's book, going from £100 to 500, even over 2 years, is a hell of a lot for our small businesses. So I've got a couple of questions. So £4.81 a week, can they pay weekly, or do they have to find that money at one go?
They do have to find it in one go. That's as it's set by the government.
Which is very disappointing. And say a business goes under, would it transfer to the next person who was brave enough to take on the cafe?
No, there is no transfer legislation required under this. It's related to the person who's the applicant.
It's very disappointing.
Councillor Bates, I think, was it Councillor?
Yeah, if my memory serves me right, the enforcement of this is Derbyshire County Council. Is that right? Okay. And what ability do we have to enforce it? My thought process being that at a high cost of £500, I would suggest that that there are more businesses with chairs outside at this time than the 34 licences that have been issued. 14. I've got 34 written down. So, by putting the prices up to the 500, are we discouraging people from actually applying for these licences and be operating illegally?
Keep forgetting, sorry. Those tables and chairs can be removed and by ourselves and stored by us for up to 3 months, which is the powers that the County Council had that we hadn't got previously.
So do we have the facility for actually doing that?
It would have to be determined at the time. That's how County did it. They'd have to find somewhere, van hire, find somewhere to store it. And ultimately, any enforcement costs to that power would have to be claimed back from the person. So that would be either a debtor or potentially prosecution, or if they didn't collect that furniture or pay for that furniture, then we would be left with that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, those are my concerns, and it's okay saying we can do that and we will do that, but in reality, would we do that?
In an ideal world, yes. But I can't comment on the availability. The discussion about enforcement is ongoing.
And I think that's my point. Thanks.
Thank you. I think Councillor Slack, did you want to come in?
Sorry, Councillor Slack, could you just put your microphone on?
Sorry. Previously, we did look at differential between a little cafe with 2 or 3 tables, and then we looked at a big pub with probably 40, 50 tables outside. Obviously, the bigger pubs will be able to pay this, but the smaller ones, I think there should be a differential, a smaller amount and a larger amount, so we can balance it better. you know, it's very, very hard on small businesses. I mean, town centres are really struggling at the moment, and we've got to encourage businesses in the town centre. You know, they really are struggling. So I think some of the smaller ones, which have 2 or 3 tables outside, should have to pay a smaller rate, and the larger ones probably pay a larger rate.
I would, the options have been considered, as the report has advised. The more complicated the system gets, the more potentially the cost it is. We've looked at tables. You could potentially have a business with 3 tables and 6 chairs. You could have another business with 3 picnic benches that seats 6 per picnic bench. They pay the same. You're still going to get a business who's unhappy that the business opposite them has got 18 customers and they've only got 6 and they're paying the same fee. So although it was considered to be a very complex, and because it wasn't, the thing that you've got to understand is as well that the businesses are all very closely net. They work a lot of times with the business services within the community. And they do talk to each other. So it is a case of the level playing field sometimes being the better option. We also considered distance, for tables and chairs.
Yeah.
Again, those tables and chairs, somebody could add one to it and they'd ring us up and say they've added a 4th table. So we'd have to go out and check and potentially measure. You've got customers moving those tables and chairs outside of that designated area. You only need somebody else to complain, and you've got another consideration to consider. We also looked at the size of businesses. And yes, I appreciate that some of the bigger businesses have potentially a bigger turnover. But if you were to look at Costa and Greggs within Matlock itself, they're both relatively big firms. But Greggs has only got a small space compared to the Costa. So, again, the legislation doesn't allow me to get turnover. It doesn't allow me to go through people's finances. So that would be a very difficult position from which to work from. So, ultimately, we have considered the options that were considered at previous meeting. And ultimately, that's why we're here tonight, for that discussion about the pricing.
Yeah. Can I come back, Chair?
Yep.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Yes, what you talked about distance, but they could be measured, and you know, yeah, they probably go a little bit out of the area, but which is be expected. But you could measure them distances really at a small distance,
But
and
again,
they'd be a much lower price.
Again, going back to the cost of the licence, if we're having an application to ask us to go out and measure, and then we're going out and measuring, and then we're getting those measurements, and then we're putting that into the application, that's all additional cost.
Yeah, I realise that, but a lot of the bigger ones could pay a lot more. Some of the bigger pubs who's got 30 tables or something. So,
Chair, I think
thank you, Chair.
that final point is a very, very good one, and it probably relates to why Derbyshire County Council, under their regime, did charge the bigger ones a lot more, because they charged £450 was their base fee for two years for a business with up to 6 tables. But if it went up to 6 seats, if it went up to 12 seats, that would have gone up to £900. If it had gone up to 16 seats, that would have gone up to £1,200. And I think perhaps the biggest example we have in the Derbyshire Dales is a large pub with 66 chairs outside. Now, under the County Council's pricing arrangements, had it been applicable at the time, which it wasn't, but if it had been, they would have been charged nearly £5,000. The maximum we're allowed to charge is £500.
So should we charge the full 500 on the larger premises? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Boynton.
Yeah, just a suggestion, and I know that it's got to be a generalisation and it's not going to suit everybody, but could there be a lower price for non-licensed premises, which I would suggest probably have a lower turnover than licensed premises, and that would be a simplistic way of reducing the price.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, and I'm quite happy to hold my hand up and say I hadn't thought of that. Most of the premises that we've got are licensed, but that is something that could be offered, yes.
Just repeat that again. I didn't quite catch all of it, sorry.
Yeah, the suggestion is to have a differential between licensed premises and non-licensed premises, such as the small cafes that operate.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, I think we're referring to alcohol licences.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, yes, alcohol licences.
Councillor Maelstrom.
Thanks. Yeah, in the report, you've mentioned that you've looked at differentiating by number of tables and by area. I can see the problems with that. Did you also look at differentiating by number of seats, the number of people who can be seated, which seems to be how DCC were doing it?
Sorry, it's probably my fault that I've not included that in the report, but I think ultimately, although that's a capacity that we could do, again, it would be more complex, and I suspect it would end up charging lots of people a lot larger rate than the cap. So it would be 500 that would capped.
So I'm not with you. Why would a cafe with 4 seats outside? Why wouldn't it be possible to differentiate between that and a 60-seat
based on the
club?
sums that County Council have done, they charge £300 for a cafe with 6 chairs, and then an extra £50 for every chair after that. So we could do something like that, but ultimately, whereas the County Council weren't capped, we are capped at 500.
Yeah, but it would be feasible for us to have a scheme
Yes,
to
it
say,
would.
like, you know, £100 or £200 for a cafe or deli with, you know, a couple of little tables outside 4 chairs, and it's easy to measure the number of people who can be seated. I get your point about picnic tables and, you know, difficult to differentiate, but if you go by number of people who can be seated, then that's easier to measure, isn't it? And you could then have a basic banding system that makes it less prohibitive for small cafes and shops.
We would have to consider then if somebody was to add tables or remove them.
You have to rely on the neighbours to dob them in, I suppose.
Well, exactly, yeah. Phones could be busy.
Councillor Franks.
Can I just ask for some clarity on a situation which I've had several complaints about, where it's a public house. They have an area of curtilage which will just about fit a park bench outside, and then there is no pavement. It's a lane. But they've installed picnic tables which, when they put them sideways on so they can fit more in, the part way, several inches, the legs on one side of the picnic tables are actually on the road. And on a sunny evening in the summer, there could be 50 people also stood in the road, blocking the junctions and making it very difficult for traffic. And they don't appear to have any sort of licence or permissions, but I'm just thinking, how is a situation like that regulated? Does it come under this regulation as there's no pavement, or is it a police matter? Or
It would depend on the applicant as to whether they were on public land or not. If it's a public highway, then they would fall under this regime, and as such they would have to apply for it. Some of the conditions on the licence says that you can't have people standing in the pavement area. That would be down for the business to enforce. And obviously if any complaints were to come in towards, then we would follow that up.
Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, just clarification. We keep talking about what Derbyshire County Council, what the fees were, but they never implemented it. Is that correct, or have I got that wrong? Did they charge people?
Yeah.
They did charge people. Thank you. Looking at is what sort of like people are saying, like the number of tables, like you're saying, these have got to be moved at night time, but you know, those big picnic tables, they're not easy to move. Where would people put them? Whereas if you've just got 6 little chairs or 3 round a little table, they could easily go inside. So I think it's a little bit, you know, saying how many people sit at a picnic bench is a bit different. I mean, I think I'm getting the mood of the room that we're thinking, you know, it's fewer, smaller businesses and a smaller amount of tables, just giving them a break.
We have been out and observed premises and there are picnic benches. I'm not saying that they're incorrect use because it may well be a premise that's on private land, but that would be determined by County Council, or it may well be on their curtilage. But there are premises with picnic benches, and under this legislation, if they were to fall under that, then and it was a public highway, then they would have to remove those tables and chairs. So picnic benches may, as you've applied, may disappear as part of the regime.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all the questions. So we have to make a decision on what fee we should set. Currently, the fee of 100 is based upon the maximum permitted fee allowed under the temporary regime. So we have 3 recommendations on the table. Does anybody want to move the recommendations before we enter into debate? No. Okay, so we will enter into debate then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can...
Sorry, may I just stop there? Could someone please propose that we do go into debate now, please? Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Slack, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm of the opinion that we should have a differential between the smaller tables and little cafes who serving teas and cakes and so forth, to big establishments where the alcohol's being served and there's more tables. I think there's got to be a differential. I think we'll be accused of being not fair to the small businesses. Our town needs small businesses. We need businesses to keep going. So I can't go along with big increases for small little cafes. I'm sorry, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just wind it back and just see if I've got this clear in my head. We've been given responsibility for this, where previously it was County Council. We can't really escape that responsibility, otherwise we'll be seeing of ignoring the law. So people who, during COVID, for some good reasons, good health reasons, decided to make use of their area and have done so, we've now got to address that. Tell me when I'm going wrong. Okay. So we now have the problem where the thing has really proliferated, and we've got some fairly absurd situations that I know very well, where you can't even get through, actually, as a pedestrian, and certainly not in a wheelchair. We have to address that. That's the bottom line. Okay. On top of that, it's possible that we might try, to take Councillor Slack's point, to be more lenient to small businesses. However, I'm fully aware of some places which put 2 tables out in arguably the most polluted part of Ashbourne, where they've got perhaps 24 covers inside. I'm not quite sure what's happening there, and in a sense, if that was rationalised, who would be the loser? So I think we've got to grasp this particular nettle. It may be an unpopular one in some areas, and I would like to be kinder to the small businesses. However, it may well be that they don't need to be where they are, and the pavements will be more accessible without. So I must admit, I'm inclined at the moment, but I'll listen to what other people say, to run with the suggestions as proposed. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Maelstrom.
I think I'd like to propose that we have a 2-tier system so that there is a lower band of charge for unlicensed premises to have, say, open to discussion obviously, but say 4 seats outside, 2 small tables and 4 seats. And that lower band could be quite clearly defined to enable tea shops to just have a couple of tables so that, people with a dog can sit outside, or people who want the fresh air can sit outside. And that should be feasible without creating, you know, picnic table nightmares sprawling all over the highway.
Let's like first.
I'll second that, Chair. Beg your pardon. I'll second that, Chair.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just to clarify, so that would be a 4 seats or less fee and then a 5 seats or more fee, a two-tier system based on... Would that be the proposal?
That sounds sensible to me, yes. 5 seats or upwards just goes into the main band.
5 seats or upwards. And
It would be a little sort of get out for small businesses.
would there be any proposal of the fee amount for those 2 tiers?
Could that stay at the existing 100? 200 for 2 years, yeah.
So 200 and 500?
Chair, whilst that is being considered, I'd just ask one other question. Would that be for renewals, or would it also be for grants of new applications? I can see that it could apply well for renewals for existing premises, but what about grants for new ones? Would you want maybe the same, and we could review
Keep
it all in
simple.
2 years' time?
Why not keep it simple, yeah.
So Grace, did you want to clarify anything? Or?
The only thing Sorry, I was just saying that potentially there is a requirement under the Act to allow pedestrian access and disabled access around a pavement, and there is a requirement to have a certain minimum distance between that of the pavement and the curb. If somebody can't meet that, then it is potential that the County Council would refuse any application, acting as a consultee.
Councillor Boynton.
Chair, I'd like to make another amendment to that if possible. It's along the same vein, and to keep it simple, as suggested earlier, I'm suggesting that we have separate fees for licensed premises, that being an alcohol licence, and a smaller figure for non-alcohol licensed premises, and that way it keeps it simple. If you need suggestion for prices, I'm going to suggest the recommended 500 for alcohol licensed premises, and possibly 300 or even less, 250 for non-alcohol licensed premises, and that way it keeps it very simple.
Can I just come back, because that sounds very similar to what I've just said. So if we just sort of change the lower rate to apply only to unlicensed, to non-alcohol premises, are we in the same place then? About 50 quid, yeah.
So can I just...
Grace just wants to clarify something.
I just want to clarify. So is that £500 for a grant for a first licence? And that would be for a licensed premise, an alcohol licensed premise. So what would be for a first non-alcohol licensed premise?
Well, I was going to say 300 as top of my head, so let's suggest 300. It's quite a reduction from the 500 for a non. For a grant for a non-alcohol licensed premise.
Yeah. And then what would you go for in respect of the renewal? Because again, you would have an unlicensed and a licensed tier for a renewal.
I would go for the 350 renewal for the alcohol licensed premise.
Yeah.
And then a reduction proportionately, which I can't work out at this moment in time.
So if you were to go on the same for a grant, I would go probably 200 for a non-licensed.
Yeah, that's what I've got written down, but I've not worked the figures out.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, ultimately, the second recommendation in the report is to, as I've said, that under the temporary system, there is no renewal process. But it has been suggested that those 13 premises that have got an existing licence all due to run out on the 30th of September, they would be allowed to apply as a renewal. So they wouldn't have to apply as a grant as they are currently existing licensees. So that is recommendation 2 of the report. And obviously, if these fees are agreed, then obviously that would be working out dependent on whether they served alcohol or not.
Okay. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. And we're all working very nicely together, but I'm a bit uncomfortable about just plucking figures out of the air with what's happening, because from my point of view, I think 4 isn't enough. You know, in my area, we've got little cafe, you know, with 6. You've got to also think about not just licensed premises, these microbreweries that are very small and licensed, where those tables are outside, you know, 6 rather than 4. But we're just batting about the semantics of it now. I think I feel uncomfortable with this, you know, discussing and agreeing that this evening. You know, it's a really serious subject, you know, for us, you know, Peter Slack said about our small businesses. We don't get that much good weather in our country. Looking outside, and I'm inappropriately dressed now, you know, these are small businesses, local businesses. You know, they've gone through COVID, cost of living, flooding, you know. I'm losing small businesses in my area. You see them as you go through. You know, come on, councillors, just give them a break and let's have a little look at this. Obviously, the other committee wanted the tiering system, and the officers have decided not to the tiering system. But we're batting together with ideas. Do we have to decide tonight? Can we come back again, having looked at it again, with a cross-party flavour for the good of the Derbyshire Dales, I think?
So, I'm just going to bring, thank you, Councillor Hobson. I'm just going to bring Karen in now.
I just want to bring in a little bit about enforcement, and just to make sure, just from sort of my point of view, if if a 2-tier system is agreed, it's just got to make sure that my team can also enforce, if it does go down the sort of the prosecution, how that is easily achieved. And if we do go down something for that evidenced by the number of seats, then it could be when it's wrong, when someone's wronging to report that 5 seats are there, it might be when our enforcement officers go out, only 4 seats are there. So I just want to try and make it as easy as possible for Grace and her enforcement team to be able to collate that evidence to make it fair across those that are paying and those that are not. So I don't want to, to sway the decision, obviously, but just make sure you have some regard to how we would actually enforce it and not take up a disproportionate amount of time if we are putting in a reduced cost, that officer time enforcing it doesn't completely outweigh what the cost of the licence is in the first place.
Okay, so we've got a few more hands up. Councillor Boynton first.
Chair, just like to clarify that although I'm on board with Councillor Melstrom's suggestion, my proposal, it doesn't include number of tables. It's purely split on licensed and unlicensed.
Thank you. We have Councillor Melstrom.
I'm just thinking, regardless of how we structure the pricing system, a licence is still going to say how many tables or chairs are allowed. It's not going to be an open-ended, you can have as much seating as you feel like as long as you've paid the block fee. So there's still always going to be an enforcement issue there, isn't there?
I do
To make sure
apologise,
people
Councillor Maelstrom.
keep to the terms of whatever licence they've been given.
Correct, yeah. I just wanted to make sure that that you were aware when you were deliberating
Yeah.
that I have one sort of eye on enforcement, because there will be an expectation for those licensees that have gone through the correct process and have paid the correct fee, whatever that may be, that we treat them fairly to ones that that aren't complying with the rules.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree that enforcement is going to be difficult no matter what. But just wanting to make sure that it is you've got one eye on once they've been granted.
But the licences will specify. How will the licences specify actually what's allowed?
They do, don't they, Grace? Yes, they do.
By reference to what?
They have to send us a plan in, like a site plan of the tables and chairs that they're providing. And then that plan is part of the licence when it's sent back to them.
Okay, Councillor Hobson.
I think Councillor Maelstrom makes a very good point, and I think with evidentially, somebody just takes a picture on the camera and that's sort of like evidence. I don't think it's going to be that difficult to find the evidence. Whatever you're enforcing, you've got to have the evidence, so I wouldn't be thinking too much of that.
Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Maelstrom and Councillor Hobson. I'm not too certain about this alcohol being different. Some of the little cafes can have an alcohol licence, and just someone sit outside and have a drink of beer or whichever, shandy or whichever, a wine. I'm not certain that we should differential between cafes and licensed premises, but the differential should come with how many, the area that free tables should be less, whatever, if it's alcohol or whether it's a cafe selling cakes and tea. I don't think we should differential between alcohol and I think that's wrong to do that. I do take on board that we've got to leave the pavements clear for pedestrians to go through. I mean, that's one of the things we've got to do. In regard to pricing, I do go along with about, for renewal, probably £200 for this very small businesses and the maximum for the larger businesses. So I think we've got to try and support the smaller businesses who just rely on a few tables and a cup of tea or a drink. So, but again, I don't think we should differential between somebody having a cafe with a licence and having a small glass of wine and having a cup of tea and a cake. So, but as I just stressed, the smaller ones should be far less, probably 200 for a renewal or for a new licence, probably 300. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor Slack. So Grace has just pointed out in answer to your query, Councillor Hobson, so our next meeting is scheduled for the 24th of September. So in all fairness, this would be a too short a turnaround. So what we could do, if members are happy, because I take on board what you're saying, we could arrange to have an extraordinary meeting so members can consider this further and we can discuss it and bring it back to the table, if that's what members want.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a procedural note, we do have a motion that's on the table that's been moved by Councillor Maelstrom and seconded by Councillor Slack to put in place a separation between businesses with 4 seats or less and 5 seats or more, and fees associated with that. We have an amendment that's been moved by Councillor Boynton but hasn't been seconded yet, and so until that's seconded, it does not need to be voted on. But if members are minded to defer this item, as you say, we would need to first vote down the motion proposed by Councillor Maelstrom, and then somebody would need to move a deferral.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Dobbs.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually we have to be brave, to be honest. I'm not sure going round in circles necessarily will achieve. It might have been prettier to have done this in private, as it were, but I think we have to make a decision. Can I ask a question, just to clarify? irrespective of how many tables, a licence is still required, even if we made the fee 0. So small cafe, no alcohol, 2 tables, 4 chairs. There has to be a licence, but we could make the fee 0. Is that correct?
Potentially, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm not proposing that.
Thank you. Councillor Burford?
I'm inclined to go for a deferment. I wonder whether it would be possible at that next meeting for Grace and the team to come up with specific details of, I don't know whether this is a big job, but of all the licensed premises, how many tables they've got and whether they're licensed or not. And then we know what we're dealing with. Is that a big job?
We have done that in the towns, Ashbourne, Bakewell, Matlock, Wirksworth. We've not done it in the smaller outlying areas. Obviously, there is always the opportunity that when we go, nobody's got tables and chairs out, dependent on the weather. I am aware that on the day we went to Ashbourne, there was at least 2 that hadn't got them out. So, yes, we could do it, but I couldn't guarantee that the results would be complete.
I understand that. I think it'd give us a flavour of what we're dealing with, really.
Yeah.
Councillor Bond?
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly confused and just wanting a little bit of clarity. Early on in the conversation in the report, it was suggested that, it wasn't suggested, it was said that we shouldn't be making money, but we shouldn't be losing money. Conversations about changing the fee structure. It appears to me in the report that the fee suggested was going to cover the applications, and so we wouldn't be making money, we wouldn't be losing money. That if we therefore change the fees, we might be losing money. Nobody suggested we should make money, so we might be losing money. Is that acceptable or not? And I was thinking. Secondly, Councillor Dobbs suggested, well, if there was an application made, you still have to make an application if we charge nothing. Well, can we charge nothing? Because you've said that actually we shouldn't be losing money, but we shouldn't be making money. So if we charge nothing and we process an initial application for 12 hours, we would be losing money, surely. So there must be a kind of sense of where we should be here, and should we, as councillors, as the committee, be bound by the premise that we shouldn't be making money and we shouldn't be losing money? That's the question.
The only answer I can give to that is I've worked through the costings that impacts the team to do the process and procedure that the government are asking us to do. Ultimately, it has come to yourselves for a decision on that. If a deficit is made, then obviously someone covers that, whether it be the council. But the fees that I've put forward tonight are covering the costs that the section will potentially impact.
Sorry, Chair. So we're not breaching anything, is that right?
You're not breaching anything. You can reduce the fee. Like ultimately, the fee is capped at 350 for the main and 500 for the renewal and 500 for the grant. Any reduction on that would mean that potentially the section is doing more work than what is being covered, and therefore there is a deficit for either the council or the public to address.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favour of a deferral as well. I'd like to have some feedback from these businesses on the ground to see what they've got to say about it. So I'm in favour of a deferral. We've all put various things in. I'm not very keen on this on the hoof making decisions. This is, it's not just pretty, Councillor Dobbs. This is people's livelihoods, and it's a lot of money you're talking about for people to be finding. So I think we should give it the proper amount of time and come back again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to take 2 more questions now. So the first one I'm going to take from Councillor Butcher.
Yeah, so I've been listening with interest to the debate, and my own inclination, I have to say, is that this is a relatively small affair. I know for individuals it may be expensive, but it's a new thing rather than an imposition. They don't have to do it. And as Steve Capes makes clear, the increase is perhaps not as large as it seems at first sight, from £100 to, if you like, 250 per year, given it's spread over 2 years. My personal inclination is to just be simpler and go with the original officer's proposal, and review it after a year or two. If there are problems with costs and people come forward with different views, then might be a good time to do it. I'm also concerned about officer time in getting more information and in having an extra meeting, and indeed their own time. So my inclination, I can understand why there's a desire to be a bit more thorough about it, but it doesn't feel like a sufficiently big issue that a sort of lot of time spent on it is justified. So my preference would be to keep with the original proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Buttle.
Bob's taken the words out of my mouth. I was going to say we should get on with it, and we should review and consult, and people will be able to give us much better information if they have some experience of the new licensing scheme. So I would move forward.
What I'm going to do now is we have an original proposal on the table that was proposed by Councillor Maelstrom, seconded by Councillor Slack, amended by Councillor Boynton. I'm going to put you over to Tommy just so we can get clarification on this. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, am I all right to bring in Councillor Bob?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, given the alcohol licensing, non-alcohol licensing, I would be happy to second that because you didn't have a second. Yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, through you, Chair, we now have an amendment on the table which we must vote on first, which would amend the original motion to be based for the sectioning of for the tiered system of charges to be based on licensing versus non-licensed premises, instead of the number of seats. So if we take that to the vote first, if that is carried, then the original motion becomes a motion to, I assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Maelstrom, to accept all of the recommendations with the change to recommendation 3. So if the amendment is carried, then it becomes a motion to produce a tiered system based on licensed versus non-licensed premises. If the amendment is not carried, then we go to the vote on the original motion, which was based on creating a tiered system around the number of seats. If that is then also not carried, then we can look to the floor for another proposal to either defer to a future meeting for more options, or to take the original recommendations as set out in the report. I hope that makes sense to somebody. So vote on the original amendment on the amendment first.
Very, very quickly, Councillor Dobbs. Yeah.
May I just ask, Councillor Maelstrom, would you be prepared to accept the amendment into your original, and then my brain wouldn't be quite so overheated?
No, I like my version. Thank you.
I'm the same, I think. It shouldn't be based on alcohol.
Amendment to the vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. That isn't carried, is it?
Chair, you have the casting vote.
Gosh. Right. Yeah. What would you suggest, is it? I know, I ought to stick to that, didn't I? No, you don't have to stay. Oh, right.
You can use your casting vote to abstain.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, you don't need to use your casting vote.
And then it goes back to,
Yeah, because it's
it would be fallen, and then we go back to the substantive.
it's tied.
Apologise for the delay. I think we're just going to go and have a little 5-minute adjournment for a comfort break. I think everyone's in dire need of one, and then we'll come back again in 5 minutes and we can move forward. Okay, thank you.
changed it. to
Okay,
what it
everybody,
was.
so we're going to resume the meeting. Thank you all for your kind patience. I'm going to put you on to Tommy now, and he's just going to explain the procedure. So if I just explain how things stand, we had 5 for, 5 against, 2 abstentions. So in effect, we have a tie. So I have a casting vote, but on this occasion, I'm not going to use my casting vote. And then Tommy is now going to explain what the procedure is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair's not used their casting vote, the motion is fallen, as would be the case in a tie. And so we go back to the vote on the original motion as proposed by Councillor Melstrom. If that motion is fallen, then it opens for new motions, such as a motion to defer for further consideration of a possible tiered system, or a motion to approve the recommendations as they stand in the report. So we'll be moving to the vote on Councillor Melstrom's motion.
I'm going to ask now if people would like to raise their hands if they're in favour of the proposal. Yeah, Tommy, I think, yes, Tommy's got it written down. So just for clarity, he's going to. Is that all right, Tommy?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's the as far as the payment system for these licences, there's a tier system put in place, a 2-tier system, with a charge of £200 for 2 years for an establishment with 4 seats or less, and a charge of £500 for a licence granted for 2 years for an establishment with 5 seats or more. And I believe that it was proposed that those would be the same for grants and for renewals.
No, for the higher tier, it was as per officer recommendation, I think. So.
Right. So it would go down to 350 for renewals, but the lower tier would stay at 200 all the way through.
Probably, I think we agreed 300, didn't we, for a new licence, and then come down to 200 for 2 years. I think that's what we agreed with it.
No, my proposal was as Tommy's just described it.
Yeah, okay, then I'll go along with that one.
Okay. So thank you very much, Tommy, for that. So we've now got clarification on Councillor Melstrom's proposal, which has been seconded previously by Councillor Slack. So we'll take it to the vote. All for? Against? And any abstentions? Nope. Lovely. Oh God. Oh. Sorry. So I've got my casting vote, haven't I? You do. Okay, so on this occasion I am going to use my casting vote and I'm going to vote in favour. Thank you. So that Councillor Melstrom's motion is now carried. Thank you. Right, so the next item on the agenda is item number 6, which is the exclusion of the public and press. So can we, please can we have a proposer to move this? Councillor Slack. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dobbs. Can we take it to the vote? Councillor Melstrom. Councillor Buttle, are you voting? That's okay.
12.
Yeah. That's unanimous. Thank you.